As he got into his truck to leave his family home for the last time, Randall Hansen threw a brass sign reading "Hansen" down the drain, hearing it hit the concrete and fall into the murky water. This metallic sound resonated with his future and past, symbolizing the end and loss of hope, summing up all his fears of loneliness and worthlessness, as well as the thought that now his life, broken, would never be whole. He closed the truck door and quickly drove away. 7 years later, as he watched the waves catch the sunlight and turn them into a kaleidoscope, he realized what really broke his heart was language. Suddenly, words like love and trust became mere symbols that people used in everyday life, like girls on the beach tossing volleyballs around, televangelists talking about the love of a seemingly absent deity, or how fairground barkers on the shore shouted, "Cold the beer is here." He no longer trusted any words to have meaning. Things started off on a more promising note. Randall remembered how a shadow fell on his hand at a faculty party. "I read your article," said a tall, slender girl with golden hair. "Comparing Austin and Selena, a bold step." For the past month, Randall had been attending evening forums in the English department, hoping to meet women. He ended up accidentally bumping into Wendy Putnam, hitting her on the shoulder, and was proud of himself for how quickly he apologized, introduced himself, and offered to refill her with the twist-top wine drink they served at faculty-sponsored events. She surprised him by knowing who he was, which was strange because she moved in social circles both higher and less interesting and edgy than his. "Wait, did you actually read the article? I'm impressed," he said. "I thought no one does this. I thought there were enough thematic parallels to write about." "You convinced Professor Gonzalez," she said, "and me, for that matter. They are both apocalyptic and hide their pain with humor." They exchanged short conversations, discussing class and college life, which was mostly gossip covered by psychological analysis of their fellow students. Everything went well, and he left with her phone number. Fast-forwarding time, the older Randall found himself in a different situation. When she preferred this more elegant version of her name was washing a coffee mug at the sink in their condominium near downtown. They were married for 7 years and 2 years ago discussed the possibility of having children. His business restoring classic turn-of-the-century homes took off, and her internship ended with her landing a position at a downtown cancer center. Everything was going up, just like those magazines he read in high school about the people making waves in the new economy. He had just opened a bottle of Warsteiner and put the old bottle opener back in the drawer. "You know, not every man does it like that," she said quietly. "Like what?" Randall asked. "You open the drawer, take out the bottle opener, and then close the drawer. Then you use the bottle opener and open the drawer again to put it back. You could have just left the box open." For a man who loved to talk, he did something unusual at that moment. He said nothing, but instead took his beer and headed towards the old wooden door sitting on 2 filing cabinets that he used as his desk. He realized that life was like the castle he had once seen in a dream, where touching any candle would return him to the vestibule, no matter how far he was from that moment in space and time. Her criticism, gentle and insignificant even amid their periodic verbal skirmishes, led him to the place where he always found himself lately when he thought about Gwen, a dark and confined space. Between that conversation years ago and the bottle opener discussion today, Gwen and Randall had many good years. First, he invited her out for drinks, then she returned to his vintage dorm room for some serious making out, which on the third date turned into irresistible passion, while Enya played softly. It was serial monogamy, where you tried to be faithful to your partner and not too promiscuous, but you moved from one to the other. After that night, Gwen asked if he wanted them to be exclusive, and in the afterglow of a wave of pleasure, Randall said yes. At this point, they became boyfriend and girlfriend, which meant that when Randall wasn't in class or at a particular event, he had to go back to her dorm room, which was in a newer and more modern dorm designed for less party-prone, more serious students. It was their junior year at the University of Texas, when the work was transitioning from what they had in high school to the simplified but memory-intensive college course material, and both were quite busy. At the end of the semester, he asked her for her home number. Randall worked all summer for Davis Construction, first as a laborer and then as a carpenter. He had a talent for the precision woodwork that was the norm in middle-class homes a century ago. He called Gwen every other night, and on off nights he contacted her through Facebook when people still used it and MySpace. He was a few beers ahead one night when he saw a photo pop up with Gwen's name on it, a blurry party where people appeared to be half naked. In the morning, she disappeared. Just a glitch, but he remembered the name Steve Callahan. The next night he called her, and her mother said she had gone to bed early. He never mentioned this to her. However, when they met again at school, everything was forgotten, as young people are never good at recognizing patterns under the skin. They settled into a comfortable relationship where he would stop by on weekends and on his way home from work on campus, but the rest of the time they had plenty of time to themselves as they both worked on degrees and careers after graduation. Over spring break, they rented a beach house in Corpus Christi using his father's credit card, and every day they slept late, made love, and then went out with friends in a nearby tourist area where there were parties with cheap beer every night. On the last Saturday before the semester started, Gwen bravely stepped out of the shower and lay naked on their bed. She was half Polish and half English, so she had long golden locks from her distant Turkish and Jewish ancestors along the Polish line, but a strong chin from her English ancestors. "So, we will graduate soon," she began. "Are you leaving me already?" Randall jokes, covering up his own fear that this might be the case with a joking tone. "No, but I got an internship in Galveston," she said. "There aren't many publishing houses out there." "Great, I'll get some work during the day and work on the great American novel at night," Randall said. She thought about it for a few moments and then said, "Okay." Later they were lying down and he pushed her. "Would you leave me if I couldn't go to Galveston?" he asked. "You'll never know," she said, turning around. Then after a few seconds she turned back. "Of course not, stupid. I keep hoping that you care about me enough to stay." Her parents divorced during her first year of college, and she had trust issues and fear of abandonment. "Well, I was hoping," Randall began, then waved his hand. "We'll talk about this another time. Just remember, you are my woman." She giggled. They graduated quickly, and she began a year-long internship at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, where she hoped to gain enough experience to transfer to the University of Texas Medical System in Houston to pursue her medical degree. Randall was headed toward law, but never felt a real commitment, and then saw the huge numbers of law school applicants graduating and abandoned the idea entirely. Instead, he spent a week in their apartment, scouring newspapers and internet sites for opportunities in the market rather than chasing jobs. Eventually, he realized how successful his summer job could be if they focused it on restoration instead of contract repairs. Sales took off like a rocket, and he began to remember free time as something that only existed during his college years. He bought a large stone for a ring proposed, and she jumped into his arms, all smiles. They had a fairy tale wedding at Blue Hole, a destination of natural beauty near Austin, and took a honeymoon to Aruba using the miles and cashback program on his American Express card. Gwen looked radiant, which was lucky because she captured it all on Facebook and Instagram in high definition. They returned, sighed, and plunged back into their careers. She found a group of colleagues who believed in her idea of holistic medicine and quickly became one of the new names in the medical center. As his business took off, they bought a 3,000 square foot home in Pearland, equidistant from his work on the coast and her desired future job in Houston's medical district. She went through a year's internship, 3 years of medical school, and a year and a half of residency before landing a job as a physician's assistant at a top-notch hospital in a medical district located south of the museums, but north of the ghettos in the lower half of the big city. The day after discussing the bottle opener, as he called it in his head, he found himself at a work site on the western side of the mainland, renovating a house that had once been elegant, but after 4 generations of neglect, looked more like a slum. The once noble home had been divided into 6 apartments, each with its own bathroom, and painted floor to ceiling white every season, so that every detail was now hidden under inches of cheap paint from Walmart. A fast-thinking executive from California bought it and wanted to bring it up to San Francisco standards. "What's wrong with your papers?" his friend Mark Hahn asked the next morning as they carried their coffee and tape measures to the new facility. They were renovating a 4-story Victorian that had survived all the hurricanes since the big one of 1906, which transformed Galveston from a leading Texas city into a backwater, now known mostly for its drunken antics and a large state prison complex. "It's just a notebook," Randall said. "I need to watch my thoughts." "What, are you getting old? We just turned 30. "This is for you," Randall said. "I'm still a year away and have a lot of life ahead of me before I get old." "No, I'm just throwing ideas on paper." They both became passionate about their business, Architectural Necromancy, Inc., with such enthusiasm that surprised the former lazy people for whom schoolwork was easy. There weren't many jobs for English graduates, and none of them wanted to see the inside of the university again. While all their friends were fleeing to dot-com startups and NGOs, the two former roommates were using the skills they had acquired over a decade of summer jobs on the island. Randall felt a little thrill every time he took on the task of restoring an ancient home or business, eliminating decades of bad, cheap fixes, and restoring it to the standards that the newly minted remote workforce wanted. "If you can spend $1 million on a house, it better be older than you," the new audience thought. But they liked even more the slogan that Architectural Necromancy provided. All the modern conveniences, no glitches, and yet the look of an old turn-of-the-century house. All day, as he measured tolerances and assessed the condition of the wood, Randall kept a notepad at hand, jotting down a few interesting points that might reveal the hidden corridor of the castle of his experience and destiny. 1. For the first time, she openly showed sarcasm towards him, although she usually avoided conflicts. Conclusion, she tried to convince herself of his inferiority. 2. Her job became more demanding with her promotion, but then became even more time-consuming. Conclusion, something else was taking up her time. 3. He no longer heard anything about her colleagues, as if she wanted to keep them in a black box. Conclusion, she wanted to maintain secrecy. 4. She no longer put so much attention into her appearance at home. Conclusion, she values his opinion of herself less. 5. She did not avoid him, but immediately immersed herself in reading or work when she was at home. Conclusion, she wanted to avoid intimacy or perhaps conversation. Having had experience dating in the past, Randall believed he could rule out all other explanations other than that she was ready to move on. He reflected that people are rarely consciously aware of their desires and instead usually act in ways that eliminate all other options, allowing them to fall forward into the remaining choices as if they were fate. This way, they are not held accountable for what seems inevitable, and if all goes well, they can call themselves lucky rather than accidentally declaring that they make better analytical choices than the average person. He scrolled through his memories, searching for some kind of consistency. Maybe a year ago, she started wearing more makeup to work and buying herself expensive professional clothes for work before changing into her medical scrubs. During this time, she began to focus more on smells. He noticed that she began wearing more perfume, showering at odd times, and even having breath fresheners in her bag. She spent more time alone in the bathroom and structured her schedule around being away from home, so late work and early workouts became the norm. Moreover, she adopted a routine where she would come home, kiss his head, ask the same 4 questions about his day, and then go take a shower, change into comfortable clothes, and use her computer. His mind again caught the conversation about Spring Holiday's Law, and he thought he heard the sound of metal falling down the drain when it popped into his head like a living thing, but maybe it was just a rusty car driving down the street. He recalled a discussion from his introductory psychology course, as well as from his introductory college philosophy course required for general education, where the professor discussed projection. When someone cannot deal with their own actions, they project them onto others like scapegoating, but more fully seeing the other as the source of the action. The professor, a fat, single woman in her 60s who drank a case of wine a week, mentioned that in close relationships people are often so focused on their own behavior that they attribute it to others. He often wondered how much of her, "Do you care about me enough to stay?" It was just her projection, an attempt to find out if she was too invested in him to leave. Randall had few complaints about his marriage. They had date nights once a week, as she would often break into paperwork with a glass of white wine always won. But the wine glasses kept getting larger in size. He wasn't sure where she'd found the last-footed bucket, which looked like it could hold half a bottle, and they took one vacation each year. He had no complaints about her in the bedroom, and yet, over the past 6 months, he had been the instigator on almost all occasions except one, right after she had returned from yet another night of hospital duty. "You know, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he said. She just smiled, but it was a small smile, using only half of her face, as if there was a little smirk there. "Flattery will get you everywhere," she said. She kissed him quickly, then they had sex. They lay there for a few minutes, concentrating on breathing, and then she quickly stood up. "I need to finish this work before morning," she said, closing the bedroom door behind her as she headed to her home office, a small nook off the living room with her laptop, phone, and a huge stack of medical books and forms. Over the past few years, he has felt the onset of intellectual maturity that comes with experience, having run his own business long enough to learn to recognize the patterns beneath the surface. A contractor who misses deadlines, never has the right materials, and often runs into emergencies is actually working for someone else and using Randall's company as a backup. He broke these contracts as quickly as possible. A supplier who suddenly never has anything in stock, but is always ready for cash transactions, has financial problems, usually associated with illegal drugs. The carpenter who does good work, but is never on time, actually hates his job and will be working in an office in 6 months. These patterns repeated themselves, and Randall didn't like the pattern he saw with Gwen. He acted systematically, as always. A quick trip to a local electronics supplier, and he had 2 cameras that he placed at an angle in the corner of the living room, one inside a rather ugly decorative lamp and the other on a sill outside the window. He recorded enough of her iPhone usage to see, using 2 angles for triangulation, that her password was 111411, a date that didn't mean anything to him, perhaps just an easy-to-type combination. He then purchased a duplicate iPhone and installed questionable software on it. She usually carried her phone with her, but when a neighbor stopped by to talk about rising crime on the outskirts of the neighborhood, Randall made his move. His hand reached into her bag and pulled out her iPhone, but the code didn't work. Frustrated, he almost left, but on a whim he rummaged through his bulky front pocket and found a second iPhone. The password unlocked him, and he quickly arranged for the phone's text message, email, and social media history to be cloned. It will take some time to download from the cloud. The next morning, he took a detour from the supplier to visit Langsala. Perhaps his oldest friend on the island, Langsal made a living running boat excursions for which he hired chatty students to tell stories, and Randall met him in this role before landing a full-time job at Davis Construction. Langsal spoke little, but saw almost everything the world had to offer, and this, he slyly reminded, was the reason why he lived on his boat and worked as little as possible. "How are you?" Randall asked. "The world is still evil, and no one sees it," his friend said. "What's eating you?" "My wife is hiding a secret life," Randall said, and explained what he knew. "It's really bad. She's very beautiful," Langsal said. "It's either an affair, criminal activity, or a fake identity because she's on the run. I don't think it's the latter since she went through college and all, but it's possible. She has no reason to engage in criminal activities unless you see that she suddenly has a lot of money. So most likely, this is a novel." "Damn, things were going so well," Randall began. Langsal continued. "You need to ask yourself if you want to find out. You've only just started, maybe it's best to let it go. If you go the legal route of divorce, you will end up with divided assets and alimony, and will be forever poor, and she will get money to hang out with her lover. This is how the law works. Take from the rich and give to the poor, and women or any disadvantaged groups will always be considered poor. Even worse, you'll find out what she's doing and quickly fall out of love with her. Love cannot coexist with mistrust or intense disgust, and in my experience, when women decide to cheat, they find some pathetic, obvious scoundrel to do it. But the thing is, she wants to leave, so if you wait, she'll probably leave on her own. He added almost in passing, now I certainly couldn't live with a cheating woman, or a criminal woman, or someone who doesn't try to work with me to make our lives better. Your wife is either an ally in dark times or an enemy within the gates, a Trojan horse that is there to sneak past your defenses and take everything you have. I chose a different path. Most people want to either burn it down, which works if you have a prenup, or take her back if she promises never to do it again, which doesn't work because once a cheater, always a cheater. You know, the same goes for liars, thieves, gamblers, drunks, and other people with mental problems. Most women who cheat, in my experience, have some kind of mental problems. It's like they get stressed, and they get a little older and can't just get over it like they did when they were 21, and suddenly latent schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder or psychopathy or sociopathy indifference comes out. Something just breaks. If that happens, you definitely don't want her back unless you want to ruin your entire life just courting someone who will never get better. Randall went through the rest of the day like a zombie, performing repetitive but difficult tasks that he always did almost perfectly because he only paid attention to them with part of his mind. That night, he read about unfaithful spouses. The first series of stories he found was called BTB, or Burn the Bitch. Most of them seemed to be written by old alcoholics who had lost everything in a divorce and were trying to come up with a little myth about how things could go better, where the good guys win instead of the courts giving everything to the bad people. He read a typical story. Mark Haskell came home early from his trip to Washington, D.C. A licensed CPA, he was 6'2" and 190 pounds of pure muscle underneath a dead body, which he toned with daily 6-mile runs. On a whim, he missed the last seminar because he had taken it as part of his professional training the month before. Walking quietly through the back door, hoping to surprise his wife of 24 years with the champagne and roses he had bought, he paused in the lobby. The clothes of both men and women led a line to the bedroom, from where the sounds of passion could be heard. He took out his iPhone and started filming. "Oh, Dan, take me harder," shouted his polite, reserved, conservative, and cautious wife. Mark has seen enough. He turned off his iPhone and walked out to his Mercedes. He called his lawyer. "Dave? Yes, that's what we were talking about. Burn everything out. Take it all. Let it be delivered to her at the address." He grabbed his iPhone and found where her car was previously, 1615 Dork Street. Then he called his bank. He canceled all the credit cards, cashed out his 401, sold his business for $1, took her name off all the accounts, and had his safe shipped to the branch in Nome, Alaska. He then called his best friend Jake Corleone and asked him to fulfill one of his obligations for keeping some shady businessmen off the IRS blacklist. He then called the carriers with a special request. Chloe Haskell enjoyed the after-shrine of another day of intense love. She never loved her husband, but always planned to use him as a source of money and then take everything he had in the divorce. None of Mark's children were his biological ones, and she had 640 lovers while he worked to put food on the table and buy life insurance. She thought that she would succeed. Suddenly, 2 people in balaclavas burst through the door. They hit Dan twice in the jaw. As a precaution, they broke his knees and then left. Screaming, Chloe went downstairs. There was nothing left in the house, and the truck was just leaving. A skinny man with a dry face rang the doorbell. "Chloe Haskell, they hand it to you." He took her photo and left, handing her a manila envelope containing divorce papers and a DVD of her night's exploits. Then her phone blew up when all her friends, colleagues, acquaintances, classmates, and family received an email describing her infidelity and a link to a video of her being penetrated by Dan, uploaded to shady internet sites. Everyone at the Ladies' Botanical Club called to cancel future meetings. She tried to run away to the hotel, but her car was gone. It was in her husband's name. Her credit cards still weren't working. "Mark, what's going on?" she asked her husband as he walked through the back door. Chloe, I have a protective order. You must stay 500 miles from home at all times. I called the kids, and they said they were never mine, so I deleted their contacts from my iPhone. You do not have money. The business is devalued. Just sign the papers. I loved you once, but you tore my heart out, and I can't love a woman that I can't trust, and I can't trust you because you'll do it again and again, so just sign the papers, and let's move on with our lives. Mark, it's not what it seems, Chloe screamed. I love only you. It was just one mistake. I was lonely. I was bored. I felt old and ugly, like a shriveled witch like my mother. Cynthia at the gym said that most guys get turned on by this, and you'll welcome me back with open arms. And because I had just been shot with a .338 Lapua, I believed her. Maybe it was a bitch ray from Mars. Either way, please take me back. There must be some way we can overcome this. No, Mark shouted. I gave you every chance. You were everything for me. I gave you everything. You took everything. You tore my heart apart. I am a martyr like Jesus, a sufferer like Mother Teresa and Gandhi, and a victim like Martin Luther King Jr. I suffered, and now you will suffer. All I can say is go to hell. I hope you die, and get out of my life, and then die. Chloe went to the lawyers. They explained that she could fight and get half of what Mark had, but he had sold the business and her cars, so she had nothing. Crying, she got a job as a dishwasher, sold her body uncontrollably, and died of cirrhosis a few years later. Her last words were, I had everything, a better man and a better life, and I gave it all up for just under 700 meaningless love affairs. The guilt is entirely mine, and therefore the suffering must be mine. I truly grieve. Mark filed alienation of affection lawsuits against the restaurant where Dan worked as a dishwasher and received a small fortune. He went to Mexico and lived on a boat where he met Cindy, who had measurements of 36'28'32", the day he received the call that Chloe had died. Christ, what kind of nightmare is this? The courts will never allow a business to be sold at a reduced value and not be sent to prison for fraud. Alienation of affection suits only work in very conservative states, and bosses need to encourage and be aware of the affair. The police are investigating chainsaw murders, and they would simply get a lawyer who works pro bono or on a contingent basis. I have never read worse nonsense in my life. He turned to another page, this time to a story from The Rock. Dan Reynolds was a successful man. He had spent the last 20 years working tirelessly on his invention, an ultra-fast garbage disposal that could crush all your regular trash into a liquid and flush it down pipes. Now, in just a few weeks, his company would go public and he would become a multi-billionaire. But when he came home early from work to tell his wife Claire, he heard the stereotypical sounds of violent sex acts. I'm Tarzan and you're Jane, said the big, hairy, fat man. Dan recognized her boss at work, Preston Winston-Salem Roman IV, a scion of the old aristocracy who owned a law firm where Mary made sure conference rooms were filled with donuts and cleaned toilets with a toothbrush. She used to earn exactly $24 a day after job taxes, but recently earned another $3 a week thanks to her relationship with a boss who resembled a fat monkey. Confused, Dan simply dropped the roses, imitation Metasai diamond bracelet, and champagne he had bought for his wife. Oh no, it's not what it seems, Dan, I promise, said Mary. Preston took one look at the gentle, timid, and depressed husband in front of him and shouted, Stop him, he's attacking me, before jumping out of a second-story window. Mary, I only asked for one thing, Dan said, tears streaming down his face like the Nile and the Potomac merged into one. All I asked for was your love, and that includes trust and, of course, loyalty, because I don't want to die of AIDS like everyone else at those terrible law firms, even though AST is available. The following week, they filed for divorce. The judge, Seamus Callahan O'Leary, was a devout Catholic who believed in the sanctity of marriage, so he ordered 365 counseling sessions. Dan remains silent until the third. She constantly apologizes, promises to never do it again, and talks about how much it has ruined her life. But she doesn't have a single thought about me. he told Cleopatra Ortiz, their psychiatrist. Not once did she acknowledge her mistake or express regret for anything other than getting caught. Ortiz nodded. What do you think about this, Mary? In fact, your time is up. Next time I want you to act out the scene as the Knights Templar and discuss it. The next week, they came in costumes taken from the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I guess I just can't trust her because it's obvious she doesn't care how her actions affect me, Dan said. You're right, I was so insensitive, said Mary. I just got lost in my needs for several years. Can you take me back? Dan thought with his wallet, not his heart. If he loses the cheater, he will have to pay a lot of money to get rid of her, and then even more money to find a new cheater. Not to mention, their children called her Mom. If he takes you back, Mary, I want you to have special sex, Ortiz said. This is the only way we can fix this. Dan and Mary reconciled and lived together for another 50 years, during which Dan felt free to pursue any strange woman he found anywhere. We have no idea what Mary was doing. She's gotten better at hiding it. Ortiz received $1,200 per session, subsidized by taxpayers. Obviously, no one found out, but there was no divorce, so everyone is happy, even if Mary sometimes walks strangely in the morning. Oh no, that's worse, Randall said. He went to psychology today, hoping for a more serious and mature opinion. He only advanced a few paragraphs. The fragile and complex male ego suffers when it is deprived of absolute dominance over a woman, as the externally oriented male ego measures itself through ownership, possession, and conquest. Voluntary cuckolding, or wife-sharing, breaks down these barriers in the male ego and thus frees the man to become progressive, open, and free from the pathology of toxic masculinity. If your wife is cheating, remember that she is meeting her own needs that you cannot, and will therefore be a healthier, happier, more enjoyable wife when you accept her return. Well, this is crazy. Let's see what the New York Times says. After studying more than 60 years of data on marriage, scientists have concluded that marriage is an outdated institution. Its origins in property rights lead to conflicts due to the natural inclination towards polygamy and polyamory present in people from our glorious simian ancestry, said Wing Yi, lead scientist in Baylor's Human Sexuality Laboratory. According to Yi, the sexual patterns of our close relatives, such as bonobos, more accurately reflect the desires of the human individual, and therefore the lifestyle suitable for humans. If we could bring back our hominid ancestors, we would find that they were all single or single parents, living in city apartments, eating a lot of carbohydrates and drinking wine drinks with screw caps, Yi said. At this point, Randall stopped this line of research. He visited Langsat after work, and they drank a cold Spaten on the deck of the boat. It's depressing, Langsel said. It is obvious to me that if you want a family and a career, you need fidelity in marriage, first of all to a woman, since without it a man will go to Epstein's Island for 14 years of love in an instant. It's like going into battle or business. You need someone who will always be on your side. If they let you down, you will never be able to rely on them again. Divorces are devastatingly expensive, mostly trading your pension to subsidize some woman because the government doesn't want her to end up as a destitute, easy-to-find student. He paced the deck of his old homemade boat, assembled from used parts and wood, which were in abundance near rich marinas. I don't even know if I want to divorce her, Randall said. You don't even know if she's cheating. But if she cheats, do you want her back? I wouldn't want to, and being a lawyer... Wait, what? Said Randall. Langsel laughed. I have lived many lives long ago. I guess I haven't told you everything. Maybe you'll come by again sometime. I don't like to talk about myself much, but yes, I have been a lawyer for most of my adult life. The law is like Maslow's pyramid, with big concepts at the bottom to specifics at the top. One of these basic principles is that you can't cheat someone by selling all your stuff before getting a divorce. But an even bigger concept is that the law never punishes people for incompetence. You can't give away your business, but you can lose it and then sell it. It's just plain incompetence. You can't burn down your house, but if they keep finding dead easy to find women in the basement, it will sell for a quarter of its normal price. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. You first have to find out if she's cheating. If he cheats, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I would do. On Saturday, he attended an early dinner with his family. Gwen had come for appearances, he thought rather unkindly, then noticed the dreamy look on her face. For the first time, he had hoped that she might just leave him, sparing him the ugliness of divorce. Maybe this was the best solution, he thought, since she treated their marriage like the serial monogamous relationship they had in college. New semester, new guy. Never a fan of the people who taught him maturity when he was younger, Randall resisted the idea that he was demonstrating maturity in his approach to marriage, while Gwen was stuck in college or school mode, but he saw the difference. "Pass the salt, Randall," his grandmother said, snapping him out of his thoughts. How long did he stare at his plate, a mixture of loneliness, boredom, and just detachment from the process? He realized that he had been thinking about this problem for too long, and that thinking about any insoluble problem replaces life itself. People disperse. One of them must do something to end the relationship, relying on the other to throw a tantrum that they can react to, speeding the process toward its conclusion. What if he just doesn't do anything? Then he will be a cuckold, a weak man who accepts the abuse of a woman he no longer wants, but is afraid to leave. He slid the salt shaker towards his grandmother, a petite woman with faded hair but bright, lively blue eyes. "You were very quiet, Mr. Randall. Is it because of work?" Yeah, Randall said, delighted at the opportunity. "There's just a lot of worrying things going on lately. People are letting me down." "Yeah," his grandmother said. Her eyes lost their shine, became soft, but they seemed to open to endless pools of uncertainty. "People are people. The good ones try not to let you down, and they do it less than others, but let's face it, most people do nothing but screw things up. Keep the good ones, I guess, and throw out the rest." She seemed more thoughtful than usual. "That's good advice," Randall said, returning the salt shaker and handing it to his father. His parents had the most unimpressive marriage. They seemed to tolerate each other, but enjoyed company and had modest aspirations. It seemed that for his mother, a comfortable home and happy children meant contentment. His father seemed career-focused, with close friends and opportunities to pursue his passions, but clearly enjoyed the moments they spent each day holding hands on the porch or looking into each other's eyes over coffee. This could be a bad rom-com, Randall thought, but then no one seemed sad, and everyone had things they loved to do in life, like his grandmother still kept her garden perfectly tidy and thriving despite knee pain, hip pain, and less energy than before. It seemed boring, but not threatening, the life they led. As they were leaving, he felt a soft, gentle hand on his sleeve. "You're growing up so fast, Randall," his grandmother said. "I'm happy with it. Young people are impulsive, you know. They decide they should do a certain thing, find something that fits into that picture, and then fill in all the details until it seems consistent. They think they are in love when they lust, or when a woman seems perfect for their life. As they grow older, they leave these things behind, although sometimes it seems the other way around. Do you know what I mean?" "I think so," Randall said, his voice taking on an unusual weight. "You can handle it," she said. "Follow your heart, even if it leads you through dark places. You are a good boy." She kissed him on the cheek. When they got home, Gwen quickly got out of the car and disappeared inside. Randall parked, took out the trash, and was sad to see what he expected. His wife perched on the couch in the corner of the living room, looking at her phone, wearing sweatpants and holding a huge glass of white wine. He went to his office to clear out the day's emails, and when he returned, the lights were off downstairs, and he heard the click of the door upstairs. Another night on the couch, and the most loving care he received was from an older woman with an open heart, in contrast to the hard heart he seemed to be married to. He pulled the cloned phone out of the stack of papers. He wasn't particularly surprised to see Steve Callahan's name in the text messages, so he scrolled down to see when the messages started. Her last phone was just a couple of years ago, like this one, and the messages started around the time it was purchased. He was stunned to see that the conversation began with a discussion of their previous relationship. How long did she do this? The phone was registered as prepaid, which in his opinion meant a serial cheater and not a sudden romance. Steve used his regular phone, but Gwen kept this secret from the beginning, as if there was a long-term plan that he didn't want to know about. She had a second Facebook account under her maiden name, WhatsApp, and even Tinder. Scrolling through Facebook, Randall saw photos of parties he wasn't invited to, weekends on a boat he didn't know about, and a lot of work photos with a handsome but dodgy-looking Steve Callahan, who seemed to be some kind of trauma surgeon with a Rolex. Randall remembered the many times Gwen had gone to Dallas to visit her mother when she was sick or returned to work at the last minute on a Saturday, and he cursed his trusting nature. He was busy, why wasn't she busier? One of the photographs gave him a clue. Despite having a medical degree and a fancy title, it seemed like Gwen spent most of her time doing menial tasks. In the background, other doctors were gathering in the hallway, while Gwen stitched up a seemingly minor wound. Holistic medicine may not have been as successful as she had hoped. He had almost closed the account when he saw the last name Katie Cudahy, whom he remembered from his college days as a slightly flighty girl who never seemed to get very far in her studies, but was popular at frat parties. She and Gwen had been friends, but now he saw the exchanges between them going back as far as the phone recorded. These conversations took on a typical tone. Katie, how are things going? Gwen, I'm having a good time. I'm just a little nervous. Katie, he'll never guess. He thinks you're a star. You have to think about your needs. Gwen, he wants kids, but he's always busy with work. Katie, just let him raise Steve's kids. They are quite similar. Gwen, I think I have a type. Katie, you found someone good to be your sugar daddy. Give me his number when you break up. Gwen, sometimes I feel so dirty. Katie, it's not worth it. You are doing your part to overthrow the patriarchy. Live a little. Gwen, what he doesn't know won't hurt him. On some level, Randall had hoped to find something that would make him think he wasn't marrying an emotionless, career-oriented gold digger, but now he saw it all clearly. Gwen cared about middle-class respectability and comfort, but something as ephemeral as love or trust was not part of her agenda. She was going to cheat until Randall threw her out, and then take everything he had. Another thread of conversation. Gwen, what should I do if he finds out? Katie, you get half the business, alimony, and half of all assets accumulated during the marriage. Wait until his grandmother dies. Maybe there is money there. Gwen, I don't know if I want to get a divorce. Katie, you can't stay married forever playing like this. Gwen, I could live with that. Katie, here's your way out. Ride Randall's train until it crashes, and then come out with us to the Polygon Club. Gwen, Steve and I could just go as a couple. Katie, he doesn't have a wedding ring. That's part of the excitement, and they don't like cheaters. He felt himself bending inward. At first, rage filled his veins, but he turned it off when it became pleasant, because at some point anger turns into self-pity. Then he felt frustrated at the futility of it all. He wanted to shout insults at her and tell her that she had ruined his life. Then he wondered, did he care what she thought? She tore out his heart, stabbed him in the back, and made a fool of him. Randall used Vipassana breathing techniques that he had once learned in an anger management seminar, and when he came out of this trance, he had no emotions. He was pure emptiness, and with that he achieved cold, crystalline logic. Then his creativity returned, and he came up with a plan. As he now remembers, this was the first time he heard a metallic sound, as if his mind was racing forward to what became inevitable the moment his rage subsided and his determination took over. On Wednesday night, Gwen returned home early to see him in full costume. "Did someone die?" she asked, and he laughed inwardly at her completely insensitive approach to other people. The brilliant little sociopath had no respect for any feelings or future other than his own. "No, I just got back from the lawyer," Randall said. "I have some papers you need to sign." "What papers?" Gwen asked. "The first thing is a new insurance policy. It pays out twice as much if one of us dies accidentally, but nothing if we die from criminal acts, ours or others. That way, if I have an accident at work, you'll have something to live on forever. policy for $1.5 million. Her eyes lit up, so he handed her the second document. I need this to secure a second loan for the business. This is a postnuptial agreement that basically says the business is sacrosanct and it limits the amount that either spouse receives if the divorce is caused by something they did, such as abandonment or adultery. Basically, it ensures you have an income from me if I do something stupid and allows me to get a new line of credit for the business. Why do you need it? She asked. I'm buying a house. Second house. I'm going to renovate it and sell it. Since I'm buying it personally, this agreement doesn't cover it. But if anything happens to me, you'll get all of your income from me and then 30% of our total assets minus the business. She looked at him with bewilderment, studying his eyes for awareness of any deception. Randall downed a couple of IPAs for good reason. Half drunk, he could only seem honest. Take some time, show it to a lawyer or a friend. We could become very rich if this house deal works out. I'm kind of excited. He handed her the papers and staggered to his office. Since he was a carpenter, he had no difficulty in enclosing a windowless corner of the laundry room, about 20 feet square, where he conducted all his business. Now he had a locking door, for insurance purposes, as he told her apologetically, and he could do the rest of his plans unnoticed. He remembered what Langsell had said. The law punished obvious fraud, but almost never punished stupidity, incompetence, and everyday greed. Everything he did had to happen before he officially found out about her infidelity. That Friday, Randall went early to visit his wife at work. Hi, Katie, I didn't know you worked here, he said to the girl behind the counter. She seemed stunned that he remembered her, refusing to believe that he could see Gwen's second social life. Despite all her bravado, Katie was an insecure girl. He could see faint marks of acne on her face, and he was willing to bet there were stretch marks underneath her uniform from her struggles with weight gain. He'd always wondered why Gwen was hanging out with such an obvious loser, but now he knew. With Katie, Gwen could embrace her dark and inept side. With Randall, she had to hide it, and it was killing her to keep up the pretense. Randall, she said, and then her eyes looked up and over his left shoulder, getting big. She's not here right now, she lied. It's okay, I'll wait, Randall said. He walked down the hallway to the left, passing any door with a number on it, and then leaned against the door marked stock. He could see Katie reaching for the phone, so he grabbed his own fake phone and dialed his wife's secret phone number. Seconds later, he was rewarded with a closet ringtone and the sounds of bustling movement. Katie quickly pressed buttons on her phone, her face suddenly turning very pale. The sounds inside stopped. He waited another 15 minutes until he heard Gwen being called over the speakerphone. He then called Mark on his regular phone and began a long and detailed conversation about the future project. Finally, the doctor came out, making an energetic gesture, raised my hands to Katie, who shrugged, and Randall walked away and headed to the nearest door. He thought he heard the closet door open as the outer door closed behind him. After increasing the blood pressure as Langsall suggested, Randall returned home to meet the home inspector. With fanatical zeal, he claimed to have discovered traces of radioactive gas in the garage and master bedroom. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, the inspector confirmed the results and found several cracks in the floor indicating a foundation failure. Randall chose a notorious con artist who made a living by finding problems in homes, then signing up homeowners for his brother's remediation services. Randall paid for a report that would cut the house's value in half, but refused to sign any contracts. His goal was to follow Langsell's advice, burn everything to the ground. She is comfortable now because she can have both a husband and a lover, Langsell said. You took care of everything for her so she can have everything she wants. But what if things get unpleasant at home? With one hand, you want to increase the pressure on her to panic and make a hasty decision, and with the other hand, you want to make her home life less comfortable than being with her lover in his apartment in the city center. When you make her home life unprofitable for her, she will go where the money is. She can't refuse to sign a postnuptial agreement if she doesn't want to admit to cheating, but she'll quickly get over losing all that money because she'll have a lover, and she'll immediately start doing the same to him. Then he visited Mark. First, he explained what he saw that day in the hospital, and then he laid out his strategy. Mark was ready and immediately registered another DBA under which he could engage in restoration. Randall would become an employee of this company and would earn less than he would have earned at McDonald's. Architectural necromancy, with its good reputation, would quietly pass on business referrals to the new company, allowing Mark to have a steady income while Randall struggled to make ends meet. To an outsider, it would simply look like a bad deal for a less competent employee who is now forced to work cheaply for his boss because he couldn't charge the same rates as the previous company. Systematically, Randall walked around the house, appraising items. Apart from her 3-year-old Lexus, they had nothing of value. He gave his stamp collection to his grandmother because he would have been forced to sell it or buy it back to give half its value to his wife. But it was an insignificant item worth only a few $1,000s. He opened the coffee machine and disconnected the wire so it was unusable, reducing its value to almost nothing, then inserted a tape-wrapped magnet into the television above the tape, connecting its circuit board to the screen. He was rewarded with a blurry, unstable image. Only her car remained. Stopping at a business that was little more than a corrugated aluminum garage on a large, unfinished lot, he drove the rental truck through the mud at the edge of the lot until he was sure both license plates were covered. After filling his cheeks with cotton, he glued on a mustache and put on huge sunglasses, then drove to the hospital. Employee parking was in the same garage as customer parking, so he drove until he spotted her car, then pulled over and put the car in reverse. Remembering to relax his muscles rather than tense them, he backed up too quickly, slamming into her bumper. He had to do this twice before he heard the comforting bap that meant her airbags had deployed. He then took the truck back, hosed it down, and used steel wool to remove any traces of plastic and paint from the bumper. At this stage, his trap was set, and he was waiting for his prey. Gwen burst through the door, her hair disheveled and her eyes intense. "Hi, dear, how are you?" Randall said warmly. "Terrible," she howled. "Some idiot crashed into my car today, and when I called the insurance company, they said my insurance was expired." "Expired?" Randall said incredulously. "Oh no, let's check." "Shirt, they sent us an email a month ago, and it went to spam," he said, scrolling the screen. "I sold my truck to a business, so I just didn't keep track of it. Sorry." "How serious is the damage?" "The bumper is broken," she said. "All the airbags deployed. We need a car service." Not right now," Randall said. "I just put all our money into the business to get this new loan and take it to the next level. I have several clients, mostly from California. You'll have to pay by card, but mine are all maxed out." "Crap," she howled, and for the first time he saw in her both a little girl and an angry old woman. He didn't mention that he was constantly spending insane amounts of money on equipment, insurance, and advertising for the business. If she looked, she'd find nothing in his 401k, nothing in his regular bank account, and only a few hundred in their joint account. "Yeah, we'll be a little broke for a couple of years," he said. "Well, maybe 5 years. Not so long. It's a long-term bet, but honey, it'll pay off in spades." She looked at him in disbelief, and for the first time believed all the nasty things that Katie said. "Are we broke?" she asked. "Well, except for your salary," he said. "I put everything into the business. It's either everything or nothing." And this went on for several weeks. She drove a rental car, which significantly reduced her salary since she did not want to spend thousands of dollars on repairs to the Lexus. He drove a truck that was now owned by the business and could not give it to her because, as a non-employee, she was not covered by his insurance. The TV malfunctioned and the air conditioning was set to high temperatures, making their home almost uninhabitable. When she complained about anything, he would start talking about their bright future in business, if he was at home at all, which was rare. In fact, Randall moved the couch from the living room into the business, where he could sleep in the comfort of the air conditioning. She didn't even notice that he was gone. And she didn't notice when the following Wednesday he came and asked Katie about her, using his status as a husband to gain access to the interior of the hospital. Believing the cat didn't change its stripes, he waited outside the storage closet until an employee came inside to get the box, then put his foot under the door. He placed the phone on a shelf in the closet with motion-activated video on and taped the lock to keep the door from closing. After scanning the situation, he went to the cafeteria and ordered a bottomless pot of coffee. He kept his head down, reading a recent novel he'd bought in hardback at full price, then went upstairs and picked up his phone. He wasn't disappointed. The video captured another nurse picking up a box of gloves, then closing the door tightly despite the tape. Then, 20 minutes later, the recording resumed as Steve Callahan entered. He sprayed something fragrant into his mouth, then cleared a table at the back of the small room. A few minutes later, Gwen came in, pulling him in for a deep kiss. "We don't have much time," she said, and immediately began having sex with him. "You really are the best," she said. "Hey." "Yes," he said, accustomed, as Randall now knew, to her needs. "My husband is a little annoying. Do you mind if I stay for the weekend?" "Do I object? It would be great. Don't take panties with you," Callahan said before leaving the room. Randall drove home and made a call. On this Thursday evening, he finally managed to convince Gwen to go with him to the bank to sign and notarize the post-nuptial agreement. By then, she realized that the great fountain of money would not come anytime soon. He noticed a text exchange where Steve assured her that a postnuptial agreement was not as valid as a prenuptial agreement. "A good lawyer will quash it," he said. On Friday, Katie called him at work. "Hey, Katie, what's wrong?" he said out of breath, as if he was lifting weights. In fact, he was in the lounge area in the background of the workspace, deep in a game of Call of Duty with Mark. Gwen is staying over the weekend," she began. "Oh yeah, she told me," Randall replied. "Does she need a ride?" "No, but, she needs some clothes," Katie said. "Do you mind if I pop by?" "I'm not at home right now." "It's okay, she gave me her key." Randall passed out, but remained thoughtful. Katie called to make sure he wasn't home, which meant she was there. This meant that she was looking for something, or at least trying to spy somehow. He waited until evening and entered the house as if he were drunk, staggering towards the office. He disconnected the router from the cable in the wall, which meant that any device connected to it would register an interruption in internet service. Walking through each room, he checked the devices plugged into the sockets and found 2 additional sockets. Tracing the wires, he found 2 wireless cameras. "Cunning, very cunning," he said to himself. He went to the garage, where he emptied 2 boxes. For another half hour, he photographed and printed on 8. 5x11 paper the view from each camera. After cutting out most of the end of each box, he taped the photo over the open area, then placed the camera in front of it. He directed the boxes toward the center of the room so the overhead light illuminated each cutout, then left the light on. This was a temporary measure, but it won't last long. He reconnected the cable and waited for the lights on the router to blink regularly. There was no call. That day, 2 trucks arrived at the house. First, a corporate moving service quickly packed everything he owned, and then a moving van that moved someone else's belongings. He found a realtor who specialized in corporate relocations and, for a small discount of half the price of the house, sold it in exchange for the buyer fixing the problems. He knew that the realtor suspected that radon would not be a real problem in an area where no home had a basement, but was legally obligated to report it. He came out with enough money to pay off his house debt and a little more. He moved all his junk into the business and then sent a moving van to Steve's address, courtesy of Kathy. An hour later, his phone rang with the special ringtone he had set for Gwen. It was the song "The Witch is Dead" from The Wizard of Oz, a movie he hated as a child, but now appreciated. "Hey, honey, what's wrong?" he asked. Mark could hear a furious, rapid-fire monologue on the other end. Randall winked. "Yes, we had to sell the house," he said. "I needed funds for business. I'm looking for apartments now, just staying with my parents. There is a place for you, too. Your car, yes, I returned it to the dealership. They gave us about $4,000 for it. Well, it was either that or repairs, which cost almost as much as the car itself. You still have your rental car, right? Great, then it's settled. Yes, I'm looking for studios to save as much money as possible. Oh, I sent your things to the address Katie gave me. She said it was your aunt or an old friend from college or something like that. There are not many of them, and we can move them to the apartment when it is convenient. I know it's inconvenient, but I really need all the money for my business. We've had a drop in orders, and I need to make up for salaries and insurance, or we'll never get the benefit. Per month, right now it's bringing in about $1,500 a month, but that should increase over the course of a few years, maybe 5 or even 7, but it will definitely increase, I swear. Oh, should you go? Okay, let's talk when you get back. Love you. Mark felt himself sweating looking at the person in front of him. He had seen such dead eyes only once before, on the face of a former commando he met at an oil field. There was nothing visible there. All energy was preserved, and the face was indifferent, as if disguised. When Randall told him what Gwen had done, Mark expected rage, despair, maybe even peace. Instead, he saw an unspeakable and endless cold, like a machine with simple instructions on a mission that would destroy it. He turned away. In fact, Randall was very worried. After he first visited the storeroom, he knew several things in his heart. A. Gwen is cheating on me with Steve Callahan, her old summer flame from college. B. He works at a hospital, and they have been doing this for a long time, probably throughout my marriage. C. Gwen will never give me what I want: a pleasant home life, love, trust, affection, and family. D. Instead, she will take everything I have to continue to have Steve or several Steves in her life. E. If I divorce her, I will lose everything. If I destroy everything, she will go away and I can recover. F. This is a small price to pay for the monstrous, stupid mistake I made in marrying the girl who gave me the most pleasure. He visited his grandmother at her condominium a few weeks later. Grandma, I can't deceive you. My marriage is falling apart. Gwen is cheating on me with a coworker, has been doing it for a long time, and has no intention of ever giving you grandchildren. Oh, poor child, said the older woman, her blue eyes lighting up. How long have you been carrying this painful secret? I discovered it little by little, Randall said. At first I was shocked. I just couldn't do anything. Mark sent me home because I was useless. I didn't eat for the next week and barely slept. I looked terrible. I only got up and took a shower in hopes that she would change her mind and love me again. I started going to the gym, but other than that I couldn't do anything. I paid my taxes late because I just couldn't concentrate. It ended when I heard them, working out in the closet at work. Pantry, so romantic. He really knows how to show a girl a good time. They both laughed, but when his laughter died down, Randall's eyes filled with tears. He continued, After that I went into denial. I simply refused to see it. I became more romantic, exercised more, cooked for her, did everything I could to make her feel the best. But deep down I had doubts, and not those that arise before an exam, but those that say that I was simply in an illusion. It broke like a fever after a few days. It led me to soul-searching. I felt that it was my fault, and in my guilt I began to look for what I had done wrong. I didn't buy her enough flowers, didn't take her on enough dates, didn't tell her enough that I loved her. But then I remembered how one summer she was sociable with Steve Callahan. At that moment, I understood. She's always been a little self-centered, which has propelled her career, but it's made our marriage isolated. She could separate her work and home lives without them intersecting. He was her work husband, to use the current term, because they worked so much together. He introduced her to the downtown party scene and a new group of friends, all of whom were doctors with money, fast cars, drugs, and so on. I couldn't compete. I continued to build the business so we could have a stable income stream, kids, a pension, insurance. All the things she needed, even if they were boring. Oh, sure, things that a grown girl needs, not a student, his grandmother said. What happened next? I started trying to find a way to make it work. If he can be with her during the week, maybe I can be with her on the weekend. I could forgive her if she gave it up now and came back to me, or gave me a free pass so I could cheat in the future if I wanted. All this stupidity went through my head, Grandma. I was actually mentally retarded for a few days. Then anger came upon me. At that moment, I realized that I had given her a good life, and she told me to continue to accumulate capital in the business. She just wanted to take more in the divorce, because over time the likelihood of being caught cheating tends to zero. She spent all her money from work on herself while I was paying off the mortgage and wanted half the house. She has long cut me off from affection and marital relations and so on. I heard them talking about me, Grandma, and how weak they thought I was. How stupid I am to finance their little affair, and how much fun they have to deceive me. His grandmother nodded and clicked her tongue. Then it got dark, Grandma. These were not your grandson's proudest days. I practically lived on the couch. Mark allowed me to relax my demands at work because my head wasn't in the right place. He was furious with her. He said that I had gone from the best master he had ever known to a useless, pathetic lump. I was so ashamed that I avoided his calls for several days. He apologized and told me to get well. I told him I thought she was the one. He said that, like everyone else, just get back to her. It's easier and cheaper than a divorce. But I couldn't. If I returned to her, I would always monitor the phone, counting the hours she was away. I would have to become a policeman in my own marriage, and there would be no joy in it. I became even more depressed. I thought about a lot of things. I considered killing myself and leaving my body in the living room for her to come home and see what she had done. But then the logical half of the brain turned on. She would simply step over me, laugh at how pathetic I was, and make love to her lover before calling the police to remove the body. At that moment, I realized the mistake I had made. I confused her energy, her sexuality, and her ability to learn with the signs of a real person, but in fact, I became a sociopath. I don't know if she was always like this, or if she was just a selfish narcissist by nature. Maybe her parents spoiled her. But she brings bad news. I can't love it, or even go back to it. I need this out of my life. At that moment, I got up and took a shower. I went for a run in the park, and there was a group of people in a self-defense class, all chanting, "I will not be a victim," and raising their fists. At that moment, I saw, through a lens into different rooms in my future for many years, two things. First, that this marriage was dead and nothing would save it, and second, that I could not get out of this, like a normal person, divorced. "This is my boy," said the grandmother, beaming a little. "Don't take this shit lying down from this little bitch. Give them some heat." For the first time in days, a genuine smile appeared on Randall's face. "Oh, I will." He told how the business went bankrupt because it had long ago stopped accepting orders and transferred them to Mark's company. Not only that, but he loaded him up with debt and was working for McDonagh level wages salsa. He told in detail how the cars were sold, the house was liquidated, and how all the property in the house was sold. How he moved all his things. How he put pressure on her at work, but did not get her fired. How he avoided all the stupid lawsuits for alienation of affection and essentially did nothing illegal since he crashed his own car, and all the bad financial decisions he knowingly made were in pursuit of more money, albeit incompetently. He mentioned that he filed the final taxes on the business, effectively dissolving it, and closed the business. All his workers went to Mark, who gave them a hint of what was going on. "I have overcome anger, grandmother. I have overcome sadness. I reached the point that the old koan describes. If you meet the Buddha and he blocks your path, kill him. I have no feelings, no soul. I am pure nothingness, and I will destroy everything to get rid of her." He then described the postnuptial agreement his wife signed out of fear of the affair being discovered. "She'll drive away, and she won't know what hit her," he said. "She will move in with Steve, and all her things will be there. She won't find me because I won't have an official place of residence. I'll close the business and live like a homeless person for a few months, but I'll wait a year, and then she'll want to marry him. Or for another fool. I feel it in my bones. The parasite needs a host. She will file for divorce due to separation, And I have a prenuptial agreement and no assets, so she will ask for nothing. I just have to wait. His grandmother thought for a long time. There is another option, she said. She took the phone. Eloise, it was so long ago. Listen, honey, I have a favor to ask. Is Tricia still in town? It's unorthodox, but Gwen stretched out on the bed after another powerful session of sex. They'd been living together for 3 weeks now, since her useless, alcoholic husband had apparently run his business into the ground, sold all their belongings to pay off debts, and was now in rehab when she called. Steve, I've been here a week now and I. The telephone rang. You better answer, Steve said. Gwendy, this is Rand, said a distant, empty voice. Listen, are you still there? I'm here, Gwen said. Randall, is that really you? Yes, honey, it's me, he said with sudden delight. Listen, I'm so sorry about how things turned out. I tried so hard to make the business work so that you could have everything you want, but everything went wrong and everything was crap, and… Randall, Gwen said matter-of-factly, what do you want? Tracy, can you tell her? He said, and she heard him move further into the room. A woman's voice sounded on the phone. Gwen, honey, this is Tracy. I'm here with your ex-husband, and we have no money. We just thought maybe you, out of old friendship, could help us out with some cash. Gwen looked at the phone. Where are you? In Vegas, baby, Tracy said, then howled at the moon. We're getting married, and Rand got a job on an oil rig in Mexico. In Mexico, Gwen said. Does he have a job? Well, sort of, said Tracy. Tricia was sight reading in her mother's friend's living room. He's in reserve. He needs to pay off this case, some kind of collateral or something. Pledge? Oh yeah, Tracy said. They garnished his income because the loan to his business was personal. Well, the last one. The previous one wasn't. What about business? Gwen drew out the last word. About. Sorry, honey. I know you two have been working on this. It's just a complete disaster. So we just came to Vegas to, blow off some steam. And, Rand proposed. But we're still married, Gwen said. About. Well, that's bad. Rand, honey, she says you're still married. From a distance, she heard Rand say weakly and drunkenly, No way, it didn't show up on the computer. She must have annulled it in Houston. I definitely didn't cancel, Gwen said. Well, they're not stopping us here, Tracy said. I want to become Mrs. Rand Larson as soon as possible, but we're in a bit of a quandary. I know you were close, and he says you still have some stuff from the house, so is there any chance you could wire us a couple $100 so we can take the bus back to Detroit? Detroit? Gwen said. Do you live in Detroit? Well, to Kalamazoo, Tracy said. A little outside the city. We just need a night bus. Is this true, Randall? Gwen said politely. She was annoyed by this little flirt, whoever she was, and played up her college background. She wanted this woman to feel the pain of being inferior for the rest of her life. Yes, honey, it's legal, Rand breathed into the phone. We were just having a few drinks, and I saw your name on my phone, and I thought, well, she's always had a big heart. Maybe she can help us get out of this little mess. Gwen rolled her eyes. He was clearly completely drunk if he twisted his mind to believe this. How should I say this? No. Let's try this. And don't ever call me again. I've never seen anyone fall as fast or as hard as you have, Randall, and I want nothing to do with you. I will send the divorce papers to your parents and please just sign and get out of my life. I'm ashamed that I ever knew you and whatever walking bitch you're now involved with. Baby, wait, Rand said, but the line went dead. He wiped forehead with the back of his hand and turned off the phone. Do you think she fell for it? You were great, by the way, Tricia. His grandmother was beaming. This sound, these light blows of falling metal, tore him out of his thoughts. He stood at the shore again, looking into the microturbulence of the dark water of the bay. So much has changed. The sound of the falling tablet no longer seemed like a sad event to him, but the beginning of his liberation from language. His only true heartbreak, he now realized with a clear mind, was how much he trusted words, gestures, symbols, feelings, and sex. He now realized that the only way to get out of the world of language and symbols was to go into indifference. Most people, if someone expresses anger, they automatically express resentment. Randall just wanted to say nothing. The opposite of love is not hate, but indifference, and for him the whole question aroused not interest, but indifference, at least for a long time. Why bother with symbols that people have used as if they were meaningful and then treated as arbitrary and unimportant when it suited them? At first it seemed to him that something very valuable had been taken from him. His fury showed that he still cared. As she evaporated, he began to wonder if what was taken was truly a loss. Eventually, he reached a state of complete indifference where he could look at his marriage as clinically as if he were restoring the pumping unit in a mid-century house or monitoring the network traffic on his computer. He simply didn't believe it. He looked at how people acted, not what they said about their actions. In Gwen, he saw a very selfish little girl who had adopted the worldview and indifferent posture of an older woman in order to stop caring about his love for her own strategic gain. She loved it when it brought her what she wanted at the moment, but that love turned off when she wanted something else. He always thought of love not as all-encompassing, in the sense of, we are all one soul, but as all-inclusive, meaning that when he cares about someone, he cares about their needs, feelings, desires, and hopes as if they were his own, or perhaps even considers them more sacred than his own. For Randall, loving a person was indistinguishable from other forms of love, such as loving a good symphony, loving a nation, or finding a connection in a good book. These things were superior to everything else. His love with Gwen was not like that, at least on her part, which made him a fool from start to finish. All this was written off. She used the same word, love, and perhaps trust, but she meant something completely different, and it ultimately showed when she loved Steve's sex more than Randall's faith in her. After all, love means putting aside my happiness for mutual benefit, not only in the material sense, but also in the spiritual sense. Love is neither convenient nor easy. It requires effort, like work, and skill, like art. He wouldn't want his daughters to behave like Gwen, not only because it's disgusting, but also because it robs them of the vision of a world where love can conquer all because we give up our selfishness and act to form connections and improve each other. Marriage is more than a contract. It is because you are more than just property that loyalty, trust, and purity matter. Love includes respect, and respect requires trust, or at least some kind of consistency. This, in turn, requires a goal other than the maximum happiness I can achieve at this moment that he saw in Gwen. Love is a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is made joyfully because something greater is created, a union of people that includes honest trust and faith in the goodness of the other, and therefore that they should flourish with you. As he entered the water, Randall realized the final lesson of this debacle, which was that the mistake was all his. He trusted language, especially language spoken by a parasitic sociopath with a pathology of self-pity, instead of trusting his heart, which contained doubts that he had not yet learned to recognize. People like Gwen try to arrange their lives so that external events and objects force them to do the right thing, but the only way to truly do the right thing is to have discipline and love in your heart, neither of which Gwen had. Are the fish biting? Not really, but they keep me entertained. Have a nice day, buddy. He stared into the water again. His life took a completely different path after he burned everything to the ground. He destroyed his home, his property, his business, and his position in society, but in the end Gwen filed for divorce under the postnuptial agreement that she was afraid not to sign. At first she thought she could make him want to leave, but by becoming a monster, he made her want to leave, and then took advantage of her confusion and escaped from her stifling, toxic marriage. Randall remembered the statistic that only 6% of arranged marriages end in failure, while more than half of all marriages, many on their second, third, or fourth try, fail. He should have always asked his grandmother for advice. When he hung up, he couldn't help but hug Tricia. At that moment, he realized that he was in a different world, so to speak, than the one in which films, music, books, friends, and even parents told him that love was located. "Why don't you two young men have a cup of coffee? Eloise and I should discuss strategy," his grandmother said, handing him a couple of dollars. He raised his eyebrows at Tricia. They drove in a work truck, both completely sober from their acting debuts. Tricia unwrapped his hand and looked at the two slightly musty dollar bills. "She's from a different time, when it could buy you a whole night's worth of coffee," Randall explained. "She really loves you," Tricia said. "My grandmother, she's wonderful. She lived through a world war, the Great Depression, and the loss of her husband, whom she hoped to see every day of her life. Watching her children, and now grandchildren, make mistakes. She's always trying to just get us back on course. I don't know what I would do without her." "Your name is unusual, Randall. Just say whatever is on your mind." "Kidding. This is a truly unusual name. My mom picked him out of a book, and when I didn't grow up like the character in it, I think she lost interest in me. I couldn't live up to the image. But you're not like Tricia. It's short for Patricia, which is my middle name. My first name is, oh shit, I won't tell you," she said. "That bad, huh?" said Randall. "We are in my favorite cafe. Suits you." "I've never heard anyone ask that. I think that's great. If you like it, then it can't be that bad." "She thinks I have good taste," Randall chuckled to himself. They both took coffee without sugar and added milk. "Sugarless?" he asked her. "If this was in the book, it would mean my character is not sweet," she said. "Or that you're already sweet enough," Randall said. "Wait, forget I said that, or you'll never respect me again." Laughter came out of her unexpectedly, but also involuntarily. It was pure, unplanned laughter. The spontaneous reaction even surprised Tricia. "Do your friends never call you Pat?" "No, Pat sounds like something genderless. I want a girl's name, but not too feminine. I chose Tricia, but after I get my master's degree, I'll probably just throw out all those names and start again." They talked for several hours before he took her home, but he found himself once again appreciating his grandmother's wisdom. Tricia didn't seem like his type, since he always thought he should date blondes. Instead, she had honey-colored hair, right between brown and gold, with small hints of red. She was tall, and he always liked women with high portability, and she had small breasts and narrow hips, which did not meet his expectations. Many might call her a gray mouse, but after she told him the topic of her dissertation, he no longer saw her as a mouse. "Are you seriously comparing the Vietnam War to the Mongol conquest? Who were we, Mongols? No, there were Chinese. They wanted to make Vietnam a vassal state and rule it through an oppressive but highly efficient bureaucracy. It is a pity that they did not understand that the Vietnamese communists fought for the independence of Vietnam first and foremost, and only secondarily were communists. They were poorly prepared, and so was the CIA. I couldn't agree more. In fact, this could make an interesting book." She nodded. He continued, "But you didn't come to me just because you knew that I was an English student." "No, I agreed because I trust your grandmother," she said. "Well, also." "And what?" "And one of my friends works in California, and she saw the house you renovated on the island. Inlaid wood and exquisite moldings, built-in shelves, and all that stained glass. I know a lot of English students, but very few know how to work with their hands and stay in the correct historical period. History was my second major. My longest work compared America after the Civil War with Athens during the Persian Wars. I think I got a B+ mainly because I made some negative points about our future here. I thought I'd rather restore old houses. It is a form of living history that remains with us today." He took her back to Eloise's house, a grand 2-story house with columns in a colonial style. Unsure, he simply said that he would call her soon. She handed him the napkin on which she had written her number 2 hours earlier. Randall found himself in a difficult situation because he didn't feel the sexual spark. With Gwen, Violet, and Natasha, he immediately wanted to rip their panties off and enjoy them. With Tricia, he felt neither sexual nor social arousal. He was interested in her ideas and loved spending time with her. On the other hand, he constantly thought about her and felt that every word he said was a proposal, hoping that she would think well of him. This in turn agitated his mind and stomach because he was once again using symbols and gestures to manipulate others. She didn't wear jeans, listen to NPR, or watch TV. Her phone was 5 years old and cracked. She believed that most academic theories were the delusions of self-centered idiots. However, there was little in his new life that excited him. He enjoyed working on old houses, spending time on the boat, reading literature from past generations, running in the park, or hiking the many trails on the island. For the first time in his life, he felt self-sufficient. He laughed at the stereotype of the strong, independent woman who doesn't need a man. But when he thought about it, he was the male version, an autonomous man who doesn't need a woman. Trisha felt it too and didn't press it. "So," she said, reaching out to take his fingers, "we've been doing this for a long time." "Shall we drink coffee?" he asked. She gave him a look that told him to stop. "Fine. I was never sure if they were dates or just dating, friendly." Trisha smoothed a lock of hair behind her ear, looked at the ground, and then directed a serious look at him. "Why are you sanding down the old wood on these houses?" "Well, for many reasons," Randall said, glad of a topic that the male mind could understand. "I want to strip off the old paint, prep the wood, see how bad the rot is, and prepare for oiling." "Right," Trisha said, speaking from a place where women, by being more intuitive and less future-oriented, reigned. "Multiple reasons. You are doing several things at once. So do we. We go out on friendly dates, but we check if there is something more, and I ask you how it goes." Randall stopped. "Trisha, He lost the ability to formulate a sentence. "Well, it's okay if it doesn't lead anywhere," she said cheerfully. "Trisha, Well, this doesn't lead anywhere. I don't know where this is going. I'm a little confused, but that's not surprising since very few things are truly clear, and of the few that are worth time, even fewer. I can say that. I would be very sad if it stopped. I don't understand it, but I look forward to our meetings. It's weird, we haven't even kissed, and, I really love seeing you. Friendship or something more, it's up to you." She was jealous of men, Trisha realized, to live in such a world of ambiguity and feel at home there. "We will always be friends," she said. "Let me continue with the house metaphor. It's like having a nice house and adding a wing to it, or installing central air conditioning or something like that. We can be friends, but maybe there's more to it than that." Randall looked at her uncertainty. "How to date?" "No," Trisha said, and his heart sank. She cleared her throat. "How to test if you care enough to decide to love me and then get married. We can date after this." "Isn't it the other way around?" he asked. "No, dating is the opposite. You get that little signal in your reptilian brain of pleasure, get hit with oxytocin and dopamine, and then decide you love her. So you start dating, and whenever you run into problems, she just opens her legs and you go into la la land." "Oh," Randall said, "like my first wife." "Or my first husband," Trisha sighed, "but vice versa. I thought he was the most amazing man, so smart and physically strong, and that's why I thought I could have him. I spread my legs, and in the afterglow, I thought we had an agreement. We're going to love each other. But for him, the deal was only for sex. I had to negotiate the deal and push him. He did, and we got married, but then, after a while, we just stopped loving each other. Because we never loved each other, we just loved the image." Where men slowly collect parts for withdrawal, they lightningly gradually reach a conclusion. Right? So you want to do it the other way around. Fall in love first, and then worry about sex. Trisha nodded. "I can easily love you," she said. "It's a matter of allowing yourself to do it and making the effort to understand and appreciate you. Already, I consider you one of the few men I know who have a head on their shoulders and who truly enjoy life so much that they don't just see me as a trophy, a tool, a toy, or a slave. But you're not the only one. I'm having coffee with 6 men now, and each of them is exceptional in their own way." Randall was surprised at how shocked he was. 6. I didn't kiss anyone and obviously didn't go any further. I learned a lesson from my first failed marriage and the years I spent dating. Now we are adults. Adults get married and start families. This requires stability and love. My grandmother Alois always said that you should marry someone like you. Same religion, race, social class, ethnic group, politics, and if possible, from the same area. You know, Alois and your grandmother have been in love with each other for many years. They love each other as much as a married couple and depend on each other just as much. There's nothing sexy about it. Sex is something you do when you're in love because it brings you closer and leads to a family. One could do the same knitting as they do. They meet, talk, and appreciate each other. Eloise would trust your grandmother with her life. How many people in your life can you say that to? But sex is important, he said. It's an indicator that you're important to someone. It didn't work for me, she said. Sex is a symbol of being important to someone, but it's not the same thing as the real thing, which is enjoying time with that person when you're not under the influence of hormones and neurotransmitters. Your ex-wife, did you love her? Were you friends? Sex took up all your time, and you never got to know her. Trust me, I had the same thing with my ex. I also listened to too much TV, radio, and friends. I thought all masculine men were hypersexual creatures. Then I returned to what I know, to history. Marcus Aurelius, Daniel Boone, Leonidas, George Washington, Arminius, Davy Crockett, Stephen Austin. Do you think they spent a lot of time in bed? No, they did things, made their mark on the world, and thought, damn, I did something really good today, just like you do when you restore those houses or play bad Led Zeppelin covers on that terrible acoustic guitar that you carry with you. You heard me sing, and yet you came to meet me tonight? Yes, I walked up to the boat, trying to work up the courage to talk to you, but I couldn't, she said. I needed more time. Time to recover and time to organize your thoughts. Randall nodded. I accept your terms, he said. I will assume that everything you say is true and act on that assumption, simply because I don't want to stop having coffee with you, or talk to you. I don't want you to leave, and since it's illegal to kill those 5 men, I'm going to defeat them. Time flew by, as always. He liked living on a boat because he could lift anchor and leave if the area got bad. Langsall told him the same thing. After losing his wife, his first career, and a child killed in a gang shootout, he didn't want to be tied to the land. The little people control the earth by spreading their power through fear, he said. A real man goes to sea or finds another planet to adventure on, because when things get settled, the merchants and bureaucrats take over, dividing nature and putting price tags on everything, and then impoverishing everyone with taxes and insurance until the whole society radiates fear. You feel it when you're in the ocean, he said. There's no fear there. There is no background hum. It's just you and eternity, big skies and empty nights, and you have to figure your shit out on your own because no one is going to come and give you fun, sex, money, or legal papers to take your mind off the emptiness inside. You have to make peace with the void because it's probably not a real void, and we'll all get there one day, and we should know how to navigate this Stygian sea just as well as the azure one we navigate here on Earth. Taking matters into his own hands, Randall moved their coffee meetings to a French bakery that served excellent, strong coffee with real cream. It was quieter, without college-level indie rock and trip-hop blasting from the speakers, and people wore real clothes rather than t-shirts and jeans. At some point, they discussed and decided to become an exclusive couple with the intention of spending a year together to see if they were ready for marriage. Tricia surprised Randall by showing up on his boat Saturday morning wearing khaki pants and a light cotton floral shirt. He could see hints of a neat but modest bra underneath. Let's go shopping, she said. She took them to the grocery store. Now imagine that I will have dinner with you all week, she said. What do you need? An hour later, Randall had twice the amount of groceries he usually bought and several planned meals. On a whim, he took a dozen carnations and hid them at the end of the cart. They unloaded their shopping and then hit the road again. He helped her buy books, sat with her while her car had its oil changed, and visited Eloise for tea. When it was over, he was exhausted. "Could you handle this every Saturday?" she asked. He groaned. Instead of dates, they went out for coffee, visited bookstores, and he accompanied her on daily errands. He met her parrot named Pete and found a common language with him. He vacuumed her apartment once. During the day, he resumed work for Mark, believing that they should give time before reviving the architectural necromancy company, this time as a limited liability company, since Mark already suspected that his wife was cheating. Has our entire generation made bad marriage choices, Randall wondered, or are we simply facing an unusually difficult challenge? The months flew by, and they soon reached the final weeks of what Randall called their probationary period. "And how did it go?" she asked. "I feel relaxed," Randall said, "but I always look forward to next time." She didn't say anything, just nodded. He thought about it and realized what needed to be done. A year later, they were at Aloysius' tea party when the old lady mentioned that she was finding it difficult to reach the top shelf. "Let me move all this stuff downstairs," Randall suggested, and they walked into the kitchen. There he asked her a question after moving the blenders, bowls, and spatulas into the bottom cabinet. Eloise thought about it and called his grandmother. After a few minutes, she nodded. Back in the living room, Randall poured Tricia more tea. He then dropped the spoon and knelt down to pick it up. But in his hands, there was a small velvet ring. Tricia dropped her cup. "Did I pass the test?" she asked. "Brilliantly," he replied. "Will you make me the happiest person?" She threw herself on his neck, and Alois said into the phone, "Call the pastor." They planned a spring wedding at the church Alois had attended all her life. "I'm not really a Christian, more of a Nietzschean," Tricia said, "but I believe in something. There is too much beauty in life for it to be godless and for death to be the end." The night before the wedding, Randall lay in his bunk, nervous. He would have to find a home, he thought, especially if children came along. "We need to get our company back." His heart felt light and hopeful, something he didn't remember from his previous married years. At the wedding, he nearly fell when the priest addressed his bride by her full name, Arlies Patricia Thurston. She became Hanson soon after and rushed towards him for the traditional kiss. He realized that this was the first kiss they had shared, and that he was aroused for the first time in months. "Save it for the honeymoon," she whispered, then nibbled on his ear. "Arlies?" he said. "Eloise liked it," she replied. "You know, me too," he said. "It's unusual. Suits you." They shook more hands of family, friends, and well-wishers than he could count at the reception, and then boarded a plane to Kauai. He had saved some money, but not much, so they stayed in a small apartment complex hotel that had seen better days. After a day spent in the shade watching the waves, as he had done in Galveston, he took his new wife to bed. "I wish I was a virgin," she said. "It's a pity that I didn't have a first marriage. I wish I had met you. I feel buried under baggage." She burst into tears, and he hugged her, then took her to a small balcony to watch the sunset. He stroked her back and held her hand. When she calmed down, he sang her one of his terrible Led Zeppelin covers. She said it wasn't as bad as she thought, then suddenly laughed. At that moment, he began to take off her clothes. As the camera zooms out from a small hotel room on a small island in a vast ocean with its restless, incomprehensible waves, the sound of metal falling on concrete echoes into the endless night, but this time it almost sounds like laughter. Randall and Arlies married and had 4 children in their average home in League City. He made a career out of restoring old homes and historic buildings, but moved into a project management role. Mark divorced his wife. Gwen eventually married a rising member of the state assembly and also had 4 children. People who knew her said that she had not changed, but her superficiality and self-absorption fit perfectly into her new environment. Randall grew older, thinking from time to time about the line from Blake, "Some are born to sweet bliss, others to endless night." His life, he felt, turned out to be one of sweet bliss, for no matter how much they fought or quarreled, he and Arlies always returned to the same place of satisfaction, enjoying each other and hoping that the other would never leave. He had no doubt that Gwen had never experienced this and could not, since she lived in the universe of herself and within the horizon of her ego. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.